your stories, your freedom. The Peter Schiff Show.
Welcome, everybody. It's Friday, and this is Peter Schiff on SchiffRadio.com. Taking your calls live at 855-4-SCHIFF, 855-4-SCHIFF. Joining me later today at 10:30, Republican Congressman Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio, and we'll talk about the budget battle and will we have a shutdown or not. The deadline looms. Unfortunately, even if the Republicans got 100% of what they're asking for, the country will collapse because 100% of what they want is only 1% of what we need. And unfortunately, we're having a huge battle over nothing. I wonder if there's a reason that the music is still playing so loudly. Maybe the producers are not paying attention. If we can dial that down a bit, so I can do this radio show. Anybody listening to me? Bear with me, everybody. I don't know why this music is continuing to play. Can we finally it's quieting down. Anyway, now let me talk about what's going on. You know, we're getting a delayed reaction, now stronger reaction in the currency markets to the rate hike from the ECB yesterday. The euro is now surging to a new 52-week high. It's almost $1.44 to buy a euro. We have a new record high in the Australian dollar today. We have a new 52-week high in the Canadian dollar. The dollar is falling against every currency on the planet Earth, with the exception of the Japanese yen. And you got to feel sorry for the Japanese. Obviously we feel sorry for the loss of life that resulted from the tsunami. But the Japanese economy is not being damaged as much. You know, it's being more damaged by the government and by the Bank of Japan than by the tsunami. Think about the incredible increase in oil prices for a country that imports 100% of its oil. I think oil prices maybe are up 20-30% in terms of Japanese yen since the intervention. That is a massive, massive increase in the cost of energy for people who now need even probably more oil than ever before. Everything is getting more expensive for the Japanese, not because of the tsunami, but because of the tsunami of yen being unleashed by the Bank of Japan. Of course, Americans are going to get drenched, too, by a tsunami of dollars. The money printing is causing more price increases. Oil prices are at a new 3-year high today, or close to it. We're at over $111 a barrel. We got almost to 112 earlier this morning. The high is 111.90. The CRB, as I have been predicting, is now at a new 2.5-year high above 366. The dollar index is at a new low for the move. It is ready to crack through the 75 handle into the 74s. It is 75.09 on the cash index. Now, you'd think people would figure out what is going on. The experts are all sitting there scratching their heads wondering, will higher oil prices lead to inflation? Will higher corn prices cause inflation? Will higher sugar prices cause inflation? Will higher cotton prices cause inflation? Will higher silver prices cause inflation? See, the whole discussion is nonsense because those higher prices don't cause inflation. Inflation caused those higher prices. The reason those prices are rising is because we have inflation. And these so-called experts are wondering if the rising prices will result in inflation when they are the result of inflation. They're looking for inflation. They're wondering if it's there, yet it's staring them in their face and they don't see it. And how is it that I know? How did I know 9, 10 years ago, 11 years ago that this was going to happen? Because nothing that's happening now is something that is surprising to me. Things that are happening exactly the way I said they would happen. I said oil prices would rise, commodity gold. That's why I invested in all this stuff. But how did I know? Well, it's really very simple. I knew following the bubble bursting in the NASDAQ in 2000, I knew we had some very severe structural problems in the U.S. economy that needed to be addressed. But I knew the government would not let the market address them, and therefore it would stimulate artificially by creating inflation, thereby worsening the underlying economic imbalances instead of allowing them to correct. And as they worsened, then I knew they would have to create more and more inflation to postpone the day of reckoning, but then, of course, exacerbating the imbalances. And that's what's going on. And the reason that prices are up is because they printed all this money. And it's amazing that you've got all these people out there that are trying to figure out why oil prices are rising. The people who didn't predict it. And they're trying to blame it on different things. Why don't they go and look at the people like me who have been saying that this was going to happen for years and say, maybe these guys know something. I mean, how did they know what we didn't? How did they know that this was going to happen? And it's so you don't have to be a genius. It's actually very basic. It's not rocket scientist to understand how economics work. The problem is all the experts in Wall Street and in government have been brainwashed in government universities to believe in the nonsense of Keynesianism, and because they're so screwed up, they can't figure anything out. And they're surprised by everything that's happening. And they're trying to figure out an explanation when the true cause of it should be staring them in the face. And when you have the budget negotiations now, and they're not even talking about this or contemplating what is happening to the dollar and the connection between the weakness of the dollar, the budget deficits that the Federal Reserve is forced to monetize, and the rising commodity prices that everybody is concerned about. Politicians are concerned about rising oil prices, but they're causing it. It's got nothing to do with anything else. And one of the things they should be saying is, yes, if we cut the budget, then oil prices will stop rising. Food prices will stop rising. If we want to continue to run these big deficits and continue to spend money, then American people are going to have to keep spending more money on food and energy and clothing, and the cost of living is going to go up. And the Republicans need to make sure that the public understands the trade-off, that all this government spending isn't a free lunch. All this government spending is making that free lunch more and more expensive. It's costing more to eat because we have this big deficit. And if the Republicans could put it in those terms, and maybe I'll speak about it when the congressman comes on, so that they know that that is a consequence. And if we get the budget under control, then maybe we can get the commodity prices. We can get the cost of living under control. But if we don't, this is how people are going to pay for it. The Republicans need to paint it so that people understand the consequences, the costs of not doing something. Because in general, the idea is that there is no cost, right? We're just borrowing the money, and okay, maybe our grandchildren are going to be stuck with a big bill, right? If we can put it in terms of, no, it's not our grandchildren. We're paying the bill right now. When we go to the supermarket, when you go to the gas station, you're paying higher prices for everything because of this deficit. Because we're spending all this money that we don't raise in taxes, the Federal Reserve has to print all this money, and as we print money, it loses value, and when it loses value, prices rise. And the reason that we have so many people who are unemployed is because all this government spending is inhibiting a rebalancing of our economy in such a way that employment can be created, that jobs can be created. As long as the government inhibits with monetary and fiscal policy the necessary adjustments, we are not going to create the jobs, and people are going to continue to be unemployed. Anyway, don't go away. We'll be back and take some calls on Schiff Radio at 855-4-SCH-IFF. This is the Peter Schiff Show on SchiffRadio.com.
The Peter Schiff Show. To President Obama, Secretary Geithner, Madam Pelosi, and all of the socialist econ professors across America. We're sorry. We're sorry. Peter Schiff is back on the air.
Welcome back. This is Peter Schiff on SchiffRadio.com. And, again, the rhetoric over the deficit continues to heat up as grim warnings of closed museums and people dying if we don't if we shut down the government I mean, first of all, let me play a clip. This is Barbara Boxer, who was on Lawrence O'Donnell. Listen to what she's saying about the Republicans, or at least this whole process. This is cut number 4.
I say to my Republican friends, you should declare victory. We have met you more than halfway. It has broken our hearts. We touched a lot of programs we think are important, but we did it because we respect the fact that there was an election. There'll be another one in 2012, okay. But in the meantime, you have to respect the fact that the Senate is still in Democratic hands, the president's a Democrat. Meet us halfway. Let's get on with it.
Okay, so the Republicans should claim victory, right? It's like the Republicans promised the equivalent of a touchdown, right? Let's say we're on the 1-yard line, and the Republicans, the Tea Party, we're going to score a touchdown. Right? We're going to tackle the deficit problems. We're on an unsustainable course now, and you need to send us to Washington. We're going to save the country. Now, what did Washington propose to do, or the Republicans, when they get to Washington? They're saying we're going to move the ball from our 1-yard line to our 2-yard line. And now the Democrats are saying, okay, we'll meet you halfway, and we'll let you advance the ball to the 1.5-yard line. So you should claim victory and declare that you scored a touchdown. We're on the 1.5-yard line. You know, the whole field is still in front of us. We have accomplished nothing. The Republicans will have accomplished absolutely nothing if they meet the Democrats halfway. In fact, if they meet the Democrats the full way, if they take the ball all the way to the 2-yard line, they still have accomplished nothing because you can't even see the end zone. We are going to lose this game. America is going to lose. Our citizens are going to lose. Our standard of living, our lifestyle, the whole thing is slipping away right before our eyes. And the people in Washington don't get it, or if they do not care. You know, you want to hear an example of the way the country is going. Listen to Jesse Jackson trying to compare what's going on right now to the Civil War. And, you know, the way Jackson thinks is probably, a lot of people probably think the same way. But listen to cut number 8 for Jesse Jackson.
So this is a Civil War fight. I think Time Magazine has it right. This is the 150th anniversary of the 1861 Civil War. And there are those who are determined to shut the federal government down to make their point, the ideological, religious point.
You're calling it a civil war. How would you define the two sides?
Well, you have those who believe in states' rights and those who believe in a more perfect union. States' rights, anti-civil rights, anti-workers' right to bargain, anti-social justice, pro-rich, and significantly insensitive to poor people. That was the great divide 150 years ago, and that's the great divide today in the ideological sense.
Well, first of all, I don't even know where to begin here. First of all, the budget battle is nothing like the Civil War. This isn't even a skirmish in the Civil War. This isn't even, maybe this is the equivalent of one of the soldiers stubbing their toe. This is not a Civil War. But listen to the way Jackson describes states' rights. Yes, the Civil War was not fought over slavery. It was fought over states' rights. Lincoln had said time and time again, if he could have avoided the war and continued slavery, he would have done so. Slavery was an afterthought. It was the slaves were freed in 1863. The war started 2 years earlier. The war was not over slavery. It was over states' rights. But what was states' rights? It's about the Constitution and preserving the sovereignty of the states. It's not about whether or not slavery is right or wrong. Of course, slavery is wrong. But the Constitution was about a limited federal government and having power to the states, not so the states could impoverish people and do all the bad things that Jesse Jackson did, but so that we would have a free country without a massive federal government getting in our way. But what Jesse Jackson thinks is he thinks that in his mind, it's really the battle is between a constitutional republic that we established and the socialist utopia, the communist, totalitarian state that Jesse Jackson actually desires, because he equates everything the founding fathers created as evil. What he wants is a country where the wealth is distributed by the government to the people who Jesse Jackson thinks are the most deserving, the workers, and he wants to take money away from the businessman, the entrepreneur, the rich, and redistribute wealth. He wants to recreate the United States in the image of the former Soviet Union or Cuba or what China used to be. And there's probably a lot of sympathy in Congress. A lot of Democratic congressmen are very sympathetic to the ideas of Karl Marx, to the idea that capitalism is evil, that capitalism is bad, that businessmen exploit their workers. And the problem is, as this country collapses because of what the government is doing, the government is going to be able to increase the drumbeat and march towards that direction, because they will succeed in blaming this on capitalism. And the problem is, the people that are in Washington that supposedly believe in the free markets are not doing a good job of defending it. They are not arguing the case. They are losing the ideological battle to the left. And as this country collapses and they're doing nothing about it, they are pushing us in that direction. Anyway, let me go and take some calls. Next up is Kirk in Smithtown, New York. Kirk, you're on with Peter Schiff.
Hey, how are you, Peter? This is Kirk. I saw an interview with Christine Romer on Yahoo, and she was making mention that that she doesn't understand why the Fed would slow down or stop after QE2. That QE1 and QE2 worked so well, and that she would not be opposed to doing QE3, and she was stating that that a weak dollar was good for the U.S. consumer. The weak dollar was good for the U.S. economy because it boosts exports, and that's going to increase jobs, and thus
but it can't,
GDP goes up.
You can't have it both ways, though. You can't say it's good for the consumer and it boosts exports. See, it's bad for the American consumer. It's good for the European consumer who can buy our exports cheap. It's bad for the American consumer who now has to pay more money to buy our to pay for imports or to pay for whatever's produced in the United States. So you can't say a weak dollar is good for consumers. That's like saying that a pay cut is good for workers, because a weak dollar is a pay cut. It's taking your money and making it less valuable. It's the same thing as earning less money. But anyway, if you want to continue this after the break, we cut it kind of close. Don't go away. Actually, no, I've got my guest, Congressman, coming up. Congressman Jake Tepper coming up after the break. So stay on hold. I will get to all these phone calls at the top of the next hour. You're listening to The Peter Schiff Show on SchiffRadio.com.
His face so soft and wondrous fair,
The Peter Schiff Show. We now return to the Peter Schiff Show. Call in now, 855-4-SCHIFF. That's 855-472-4433. Rebel Radio. The Peter Schiff Show.
Welcome back, everybody. And this is Peter Schiff on SchiffRadio.com, where we are watching the American standard of living slowly collapsing right before our eyes as members of Congress literally do nothing about it. Although I have one congressman who is at least trying on the line with me right now, Representative Jim Jordan, Republican from Ohio. Jim, welcome to the show.
Good to be with you, Peter.
Hey, before you came on, I kind of drafted a little analogy, and let me get your opinion on it regarding the budget battle, because a lot of Republicans are in Congress now, and they were elected because they promised to save us from fiscal ruin. They recognize that we were on a disastrous course, and I think we're headed for a financial crisis that will hit in the next few years that will dwarf 2008. I mean, 2008 is going to look like a Sunday school picnic. So they promised to really do something to tackle these problems. And I said, look, it's like they promised to score a touchdown. We got the ball on the 1 yard line. They promised to score a touchdown, yet they propose now, when they get there, let's move the ball from the 1 yard line to the 2 yard line. And the Democrats are saying, we can't take it all the way to the 2 yard line. Let's just compromise on the 1.5 yard line. And can we really claim victory if we move the ball a half a yard when we need a touchdown, 98 yards down the field?
Yeah, no, well said. If we can't even take the first modest step, then how are we going to take those other steps that are necessary fix the country and to hold off a financial catastrophe, as you, I think, rightly predict.
Well, the problem is, though, we can't afford to take a modest step right now. See, we the time to take modest steps was years ago. We're running out of time. I mean, if you look at what's happening right now, the dollar is collapsing. It is collapsing because we're running these huge deficits, and the Federal Reserve has to print the money. So oil is at $111 a barrel. Food prices are skyrocketing because you guys are running deficits. It's not because of China. It's not because of speculators. This is the cost. American people have to pay more to eat and drive their cars and heat their homes because you won't cut spending. That is what's causing it.
I agree, Peter. I agree. Look, the fact that the number we're trying to get to is at the level it is because we took a stand early and said we at least got to move it this far. We at least got to take this big of a first step. Yesterday we unveiled a budget proposal that actually balances within 8 years, not a longer period of time. As although there are good things in the Paul Ryan and committee budget, good policy initiatives, we felt like it's important to balance in a much quicker period of time because the situation warrants taking this kind of action.
And this is what I think the Republicans should do. See, don't use up all of your chips on this fight. See, this fight isn't even worth having because you're fighting over nothing. What you should be doing right now, don't even raise the debt ceiling. Just have the real argument now. Have the real argument if you're going to go down on principle, if you're going to shut the government down, and I believe we should shut it down rather than increase the debt limit, let's talk about real meaningful cuts, huge cuts right now, and what that means, how that benefits the American people to have this giant burden removed from their back.
I agree with you, Peter, but remember, we are still talking about real dollars. And the difference, that we won $61 billion, the Democrats won $30 billion. That $30 billion difference is the equivalent of a whole year's state budget in the state of Ohio, where I come from. So we are talking about real money. And then let's remember, I hear the argument all the time. Well, you should get past this 2011 budget debate so we can get on to 2012. Well, just remember, this is about real money. The 2012 budget, it's going to pass the House. It's going to go to the Senate. They're going to throw it in the trash can. And next year, we're going to be right back here negotiating these short-term budget agreements.
Oh, no, you missed my point. You missed my point. I don't want to compromise with the Democrats and do the $30 billion because, first of all, you're talking about 1% of the budget. It's a rounding error. It doesn't do anything. I'm saying have the real battle right now. Don't talk about compromise between $30 billion and $60 billion. Let's cut $1.5 trillion out of the budget right now. Do not raise the debt ceiling. Right? Do not let them.
On the debt ceiling vote to come. Well, you're exactly right about two things. There are two votes that matter this whole Congress, this whole year. The vote on the CR that we're in right now, this vote, and the debt ceiling vote. Those are the only two that actually count because those are the only two where we're dealing with real money. So I agree with the point.
But the debt ceiling is where you take a stand. You say, you know what? The borrowing stops right now. It stops right now. Because if we continue this for another couple of years, you believe me, all right, what is going to happen in this country? Because you're going to see a currency crisis, a bond crisis. You're going to see prices literally doubling, tripling. How do you think it's going to be when oil costs $20 a gallon at the pump?
Yeah, well, your point well made. Let me ask you this: we get the same argument from the other side that if you don't raise the debt ceiling, you're going to have the same crisis. And I point back to them. I said we're already going to get there if we keep spending at this crazy rate. So that is the argument we get from the other side is exactly what you led. If you don't increase the debt ceiling, we're going to have a bond crisis and it's going to affect the bond market. And my point is we're going to get there if we keep at this ridiculous pace of spending.
Well, the truth is because the government has made so many mistakes for so long, right, that there are consequences. The government has so screwed up this economy that there's no way out of it without a crisis. So the question is, it's not a question between no crisis and crisis. It's do we have a big crisis now or a horrific crisis later? And the later is not, there's not many years now left. We've kicked the can down the road. We're running out of road here. So we have to face the reality that the U.S. government, with taxes and regulations and cheap money, has screwed this economy up royally. And it's going to take a lot of pain to fix it because we have an economy where people just borrow and spend and no one is saving and producing. We're living off the charity of the rest of the world. We got this phony economy that only exists as long as we keep interest rates at zero. And the minute we take them off of zero, the whole thing is going to collapse. But the sooner we do that, the better, because the longer we wait, the worse the collapse is going to be.
It's the old automobile commercial. You pay me now, pay me later. Concept, and you're exactly right. If you can fix it now, it's painful, but it's not as painful if we wait. And
the problem
again,
is the politicians see most of the guys in Congress there. To them, they'd rather have more pain in the future, because if they have pain now, they think they might not get reelected. So they're willing to sacrifice the country just so they can get another term. I mean, what is that? I mean, these guys are a bunch of traitors.
Yeah, Peter, I shared this story the other day. I had a teacher and coach in high school, taught chemistry. My background's in the sport of wrestling. He was our wrestling coach, toughest guy around, and coaching the team. And he talked about discipline every day. And he had a great definition. He said, discipline is doing what you don't want to do when you don't want to do it. And what he really meant was doing it his way when you'd rather do it your way. He meant doing things the right way instead of doing them the convenient way. And you're exactly right. Politicians for way too long have said, well, let's just do the convenient thing. Let's just kind of keep on spending a little bit and kicking the can down the road and pretending like we're trying to solve it. And we'll just keep doing the convenient thing instead of doing the tough thing, the discipline thing, the right thing, which is to say we have got to stop the spending.
And, because what's going to happen – yeah,
I believe this fight, though, is important, Peter, because it is the first step. If we can't even win on $30 billion, to get $30 more billion, we can't even get $61 billion in cuts, which, remember, is just 1/4 of February's monthly deficit. If we can't even get $61 billion in cuts, how are we going to demonstrate to the American people we're going to be able to improve that and do better?
But see, here's my problem. Even if you get those cuts, we're still going to have a crisis, so it's not worth it. And you're not. And if you act like we solved the problem, we've solved nothing. Let's have the real battle, because if we keep doing it piecemeal, if we take $30 billion, we're talking about. I bet next year's budget deficit will be $2 trillion. It's $1.6 trillion for 2011. I bet 2012 comes in at $2 trillion. And so it's growing. Whatever you're cutting isn't even going to stop it from getting bigger. And the real problem is when interest rates go up, what happens when we're spending $1.5 trillion a year just on interest on the national debt? Because when interest rates spike up, I mean, are we going to spend all of our money paying the Chinese and the Japanese interest on the money they loaned us?
No, obviously we can't do that. Look, Peter, though, if you can't be disciplined and principled in the small things, how are you going to be disciplined and principled in the big things? We got to get this Congress to at least take the first step.
Well, after the break, I want to talk about your proposal, because you've actually got a proposal right on the table to cut about, what, 9 or 10 trillion over the next 10 years out of the budget?
Out of the baseline, you bet.
Yeah, that at least sounds promising, so let's talk about that. Unfortunately, we don't have 10 years. We got to do it in the next year or two, or it's too late. But don't go away. We got more to go with Congressman Jim Jordan after the break. You're listening to Peter Schiff on The Peter Schiff Show.
I'm past and the world is new. Nothing else seems like it did before. Then you made it through another door.
The Peter Schiff Show. Since the Peter Schiff Show was last on the air, the national debt added another $7.89 million. Luckily, Peter's intelligence is growing twice as fast.
That's incredible.
Welcome back to your source of sanity in an insane world. It's the Peter Schiff Show.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Peter Schiff, and with me now is Republican Representative Jim Jordan. And Jim, before I ask you the specifics of your plan, let me ask you this. You're in Congress now. How many of your colleagues do you think actually perceive the gravity of the threat that we face in the next few years?
I think a significant number of the Republican conference does. I really do. I think, frankly, the other party, there are very few, because just look at their rhetoric, look at their, you got, Harry Reid talking about the poetry festival, Hall of Fame cowboy thing, whatever it was called, how important that is to spend money on. And it's just like, for me, part of this is like, it's somewhat liberating when people come into my office and to talk to me about this program or that program. It's kind of liberating to be able to tell them we're broke. We cannot do it. There is just no possible way we can increase funding for that. We've got to be cutting spending. So they don't seem to get it. And I will say this, though. I do believe a significant number of the freshman class,
do they realize, though, that people are storing food, preparing for shortages, that people are arming themselves, preparing for civil unrest because of what's going on in Washington?
Yeah. I don't know that there's that all members understand that how serious this problem really is, and that is we'll see. I mean, a good indication will be next week when we offer our balanced budget as an amendment, as a substitute for the budget proposals that will be on the floor.
Now, what is first? Can you give me some of the specifics on your budget?
In simple terms, it takes the committee budget, the Paul Ryan budget, those ideas, those concepts, and we speed them up because we feel like, as I know you do, that the situation warrants a much more faster approach, a much more disciplined approach to our financial situation. So we say, for example, on Medicare, if you're 59 or younger, the system will stay the same. But we got to start speeding up these changes, raising the age for people who are 59 59 and older. The system will stay the same. But for people 59 younger, we have to begin to change it and increase the age and save money and frankly save that system.
Well, let me
and
ask
we
you
do
a
the same
question.
thing with Social Security. We say if you're 59 and older, nothing will change. If you're younger, we got to start increasing the age.
Well, here's what I understand, though.
If you don't, we all go bankrupt.
What is the difference between someone who's 58 and 59? Why should the guy who's 59 get a better deal than the guy that's 58? If we're going to make changes, why not apply them to everybody? Why draw a line and say, well, if you're 59, you're going to keep getting everything, but if you're 58, you're going to have to take less? So that doesn't seem fair to me.
Well, and the only less you're going to take is you're going to have to work a few months longer before you qualify for the program. So it's not like the dollar amount be less. It just means a few more months longer. And the reason we do that is because you have to pick some age to start implementing these things, or the whole thing goes belly up. And we actually think people close to retirement age have sort of structured their lives and made decisions around the promises that the previous government had made to them. We think you got to keep those promises for people who are close to retirement age.
Well, but here's the problem: the promises never should have been made in the first place because they were promising other people's money. They were promising to steal money from future generations, and the future generations are broke. They don't have it.
Look, I would love to send the bill, as Chris Christie said. I'd love to send the bill to the previous elected officials. I didn't vote for this stuff. I've actually offered the only balanced budget in Congress the last 2 years, so I didn't vote for this stuff. But the fact is we inherited the problem, and we have to deal with it. We think this is a credible way to deal with it that understands how the gravity of the situation, and that's why we put the proposal forward.
Yeah. Now, what type of economic assumptions? One of the problems I always have with these budgets is the rosy assumptions on growth, unemployment,
we don't do that.
interest rates.
Yeah, good point. We don't. We take the CBO assumptions, the same that Paul Ryan takes in his budget. We thought you had to compare apples to apples, so we do that. The president has a little bit rosier scenarios in his plan using OMB. His revenues are much higher. Obviously, he's counting on tax increases to also bump up that already pretty optimistic revenue assumptions. So we think he is cooking the books in his plan. We don't do that. We just say, look, we're going to take the straight number CBO. We also look at other social welfare spending. We think there has been a 57% increase in the last 4 years in other mandatory social welfare spending. We got 77 different programs. This goes from school breakfast, school lunch, WIC programs, education programs, Pell Grants, et cetera. We feel like, look, you can't increase it 57%. We can cut back there as well. So we do that. We get rid of farm subsidies. We think, look, why should that be? We do what we sell 5% of government assets as a start. We do all kinds of, and look, we don't raise any taxes.
Yeah,
we understand you want economic growth too, and you don't want to be taxing the people who are the job creators.
And I think one of the points that if you could make it would help with your argument. There's a lot of people in Congress, especially on the Democratic side, that say, well, if we cut government spending, we're going to hurt jobs and hurt the economy. Well, that's the belief then that if we just increase the deficit and spend more money, we'll create jobs. And so if you're yes.
Yeah. If that were the case, if what the Democrats are saying were true, we would have the greatest economy in history because in the last 4 years we've increased government spending 40%. I mean, if big government spending were going to solve the problem, we'd have been out of this mess a long time ago because for the last 2.5, and frankly, it started under the last Republican administration. If that were going to fix it, we'd have been out of this mess a long time ago because that's all we've been doing.
The point you have to make is the reason that so many people are unemployed right now is because the government got so big. The government sucked all the capital out of the economy so we can no longer create the private sector jobs because all the money's been shifted to Washington, D.C. That is the problem.
Yeah, when you spend this much and you have interest payments as high as we do, even with low interest rates, when you're doing this, it's in effect a tax increase on the job creators, a tax increase on the American people. Well, it's just a different way of saying it, a different way of doing it.
What is going to happen when interest rates go to, let's say, 10%? What if 2 years from now the yield on a Treasury is 10%? What kind of shape is the budget in at a 10% rate of interest?
Oh, our interest payments are over $200 billion under the rosy scenario that the president wants. At the end of the decade, the interest payments start approaching what we currently spend on national defense. So if you get a spike in interest rates, it will be unbelievable impact that it will have on the Treasury and on our financial situation.
Because that's what's happening in Ireland. That's what's happening in Greece. What's happening is people don't want to lend them money anymore, and so rates are rising. And why would anybody? The dollar is falling like a stone. Why would anybody want to lend us money? Right? And if the Fed stops with QE in the summer, and the Fed's been buying 70% of our bonds, who is going to buy the bonds? Who in their right mind would buy these bonds unless interest rates rose sharply?
Right. No, you're exactly right. That's why we think our plan is so important, because it would be a plan that would send a message to the bond market for once we're getting serious. That's why this fight, although small, we talked about this before the break, although a relatively speaking small amount of dollars, is so important that we fight hard and win, because it sends a message that we're actually getting serious, we're actually willing to fight to achieve real savings.
Right, but I think if you fight to achieve minimal savings, what that does is sends the message that nothing real is going to happen. I think you have to, you burn use your chips on a bigger battle, but not in the future to have that big battle right now, because otherwise the message that's being sent is you'd have to be an idiot to buy a U.S. Treasury. In fact, the message that you're sending is if you still have U.S. Treasuries, you better sell them now before they have no value.
Here, I know that the way the way the shows work is you typically ask me the question, but the one thing I always hear is on the debt ceiling that if we quote default and we don't, and the debt ceiling is not raised, that's a big problem to the bond markets. Which would you say is the bigger problem? That issue, or where we're headed in the not too distant future if we continue to spend? Which is the bigger concern?
The latter. If we do not raise the debt ceiling, that doesn't mean that we default. We have the option of cutting government spending so we can pay our bills. But, I believe that if we really confront our problems, we need to restructure the debt. I think that we cannot pay 100 cents on the dollar. It's impossible. So I think we do need to talk to our creditors and work on a solution, because we can't just keep interest rates low and keep printing money. It's better to let interest rates rise and restructure the debt. And I think if we're going to ask people on Social Security to take less money, and I think we need real meaningful cuts in Social Security, Medicare. But if we're going to ask American retirees to have big cuts in their Social Security benefits, we also have to ask people who own U.S. Treasuries, hey, you're not going to get back all your money either, because the country is broke. And we cannot extract enough taxes to pay these bills. And if we try to inflate them away, which we're doing now, it's much worse than admitting we can't pay. Anyway, Congressman, thanks for being on the show. I appreciate what you're doing. Keep on fighting. Realize there is a lot at stake, a lot more than just the next election. Anyway, don't go away, everybody. We've got another hour of the show coming up on SchiffRadio.com, the gold standard in talk radio.
The Peter Schiff Show.
You make no friends in the pits and you take no prisoners. 1 minute you're up $500,000 in soybeans, and the next, boom, your kids don't go to college and they've repossessed your Bentley. Are you with me?
The revolution starts now.
We have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Turn those machines back on!
You are about to enter the Peter Schiff Show.
Show me the money!
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on Earth.
The Peter Schiff Show is on.
Call in now. 855-4SCHIFF.
That's 855-472-4433.
I don't know when they decided that they wanted to make a virtue out of selfishness.
Your money, your stories,
your freedom.
The Peter Schiff Show.
Welcome back, everybody. The second hour of the Peter Schiff Show is underway, and I will take calls 855-4-SCHIFF, 855-472-4433. The gold and silver rally continues. We've made new highs for the day during the commercial break. Gold is now up $10 an ounce. We're above $1,435 in the spot market. Futures markets are higher. Silver now, spot silver prices up 70 cents, just under $39.50. Futures already trading above $40 an ounce for 1 ounce of silver. Oil now up $1.25, trading at $111.50 a barrel. But the stock market has turned negative, but not the commodities markets, not the currency markets. CRB making new highs, dollar near the lows. And imagine, we just got a rate hike out of the ECB, yet gold and silver prices are rising right in the face of it. That throws water on the argument that if the Fed raised rates, gold and silver prices would fall. Why aren't they falling? Because the ECB is raising rates. You know why? Because they're not raising them fast enough. The ECB is behind the curve. And if the ECB is behind the curve, imagine how much further back the Fed is. These markets, I think, are kicking into overdrive as more and more people wake up and sense exactly how big this problem is. Anyway, we got quite a few people on hold, so let's go to the phones. Oh, actually, before I did, I wanted to play this one clip from Nancy Pelosi. Listen to, she's trying to criticize the Republicans' control of Congress. Play this. It's clip number 12.
In fewer than 100 days, by April 15th, the Republicans will have been in the majority for 100 days. And they have put forth no jobs bills. In fact, they have voted for bills that slash jobs and rolled out plans to end Medicare. The so-called path to progress looks more like a road to ruin for Medicare and a road to riches for big oil. Put simply, it is unfair, it does not create jobs, it does not grow the economy, and it does not strengthen the middle class.
So how does Nancy Pelosi plan on strengthening the middle class? By taxing them to death, by creating inflation so that the cost of living goes up? But here's the real key to this quote. Nancy Pelosi thinks the only way to create jobs is for government to pass a program that says we're creating government jobs. The jobs bill is cutting government spending. The best jobs bill that we have, in fact, the only bill that will create jobs is a bill that cuts government spending, because government spending is preventing jobs from being created. And any jobs the government creates by spending money, it will destroy more productive jobs in the private sector, because it had to take that money out of the private sector in order to pay the government workers. And if instead they pay the government workers by having Ben Bernanke print the money, then they steal the purchasing power out of the private sector, and they destroy the jobs in that way, because they destroy the capital and they debase everybody's income. Anyway, as I said, back to the phones, going to Chris in Freehold, New Jersey. Chris, you're on.
Hey, Peter, what's up?
Gold, silver, oil, everything that you need to buy is up.
I already bought it. I listened to you a while ago, but I just wanted to first comment. You were on Fast Money last night, and you made your comment about them throwing in the towel. And
yeah, they changed. I think they kind of like. I think when I showed them how I was going to respond, I shouldn't have showed them, because they actually changed the segment. So they didn't ask me what I was going to throw in the towel. I had to bring it up myself. So it lost some of its impact.
Yeah, that was funny. You asked yourself and then answered it. But yeah, they didn't jump all over you. They're at the point now where they actually listened to you, and they actually complimented you after you were on, and they said it made sense and that your strategies work well. So I guess that's a sign of them throwing the towel, because if you said that a year ago, they would have jumped all over you.
Well, they usually do. Normally it's when I say something about economics. It's hard to argue with the investment strategy, because clearly the strategy is working. But what they don't understand is the strategy is working because the government keeps doing the wrong thing. And, I want the government to do the right thing, even though it's counter my investment strategy. But my investment strategy is based on what I think is going to happen, not based on what I want to happen. I don't want the government to destroy the country. I don't want the government to destroy the currency. But they're going to do it anyway. And if they're going to do it, I'm going to try to arrange my portfolios and my clients' portfolios the best way I can to mitigate that damage.
Yeah, and you kind of answered my question before. I was going to ask if the Fed raised rates, which they probably won't, but if they raise rates dramatically, would that cause you to short gold? And if not, what would cause you to start shorting commodities?
No, if they raised rates dramatically, now the question is, what is dramatically? If they raise rates by 100 basis points, for example, they went from 0 to 1% in one shot, that would probably cause me to buy the dip. I would think that if the Fed did that, gold prices would go down, silver prices would go down, but they wouldn't stay down because that's not enough. Now, if the Fed moved interest rates up to 10%, oh, yeah, I mean, that would be – but they're not going to do that. That's the thing. I just don't see that the chance – because if they did that, they would force the government into default. Now, are they going to do that? I can't even see a remote possibility that they will do that. But if they do that, then gold will fall. But I think it will fall less than the stock market. I think if they do that, you'll lose more money in stocks than you will in gold. You'll lose more money on bonds. If they raised interest rates up to 10%, bond prices would implode. So I think that if the federal government raised interest rates sharply, the asset class that might lose the least would be gold. So, even if you lose, you're still better off because what counts is relative wealth and relative prices. So if you lose less than everybody else, and if what you own goes down less than what everybody else owns, you're better off because you can buy more stuff. You have more purchasing power. So I don't think there's really a circumstance that I can envision right now that would cause me to want to sell my gold or silver. Now, what might make me do it would be real structural changes in the U.S. Tax structure, in government, real reform, meaningful reform that would result in true, lasting economic growth, and then I would sell my gold. But I think that's going to happen when the economy is a complete basket case, when gold is way up in the stratosphere, and when the country is really in ruin, when there's blood in the streets, and they're threatening to storm the White House and Congress and string everybody up, and maybe finally we do the right thing, and then I can see that the danger is behind us. We're finally swallowing the bitter-tasting medicine that we need, and that it's viable to invest in the U.S., and then I would happily take whatever gold and silver I had and invest in U.S. businesses that I would expect to thrive under a truly free market economy in the United States.
Okay, but even if the Fed raised interest rates to 10%, the money's still out there. The inflation's still created. So wouldn't gold prices really just level off since the money's already out there? They can't get rid of it?
Well, no, if they raised interest rates at 10% right now and they started and they sold all these government bonds, I think that would bring everything down. I mean, I don't think that that gold would rise in that, and of course, that would bankrupt the financial institutions, and there'd be no bailouts. See, if the Fed does that, basically they're saying there's no bailouts because the bailouts mean the interest rates stay low. So basically, it would be Armageddon on Wall Street. You'd have all these firms failing. The government would have to default on the debt. But you know what? Yeah, you could be right. Maybe gold would even rise under those circumstances, but who knows? But anyway, thank you for the call. We got more coming up, more calls after the break. You're listening to the Peter Schiff Show on SchiffRadio.com.
United together we'll make our stand. Divided we fall. Get up off your knees, brothers, sisters. To get your freedom, standing tall.
The Peter Schiff Show.
To President Obama, Secretary Geithner, Madam Pelosi, and all of the socialist econ professors across America.
We're sorry. Peter Schiff is back on the air.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Peter Schiff on Schiff Radio, and during the break, gold price is up another $3 an ounce. Now we're at new highs, up about $13 an ounce. How much is silver up now? 75 cents and rising. The Huey index that we discussed yesterday, again, at new record high territory, up another 2% on the day, trading over $608. That's an index of gold and silver mining stocks. 10 years ago, that index was below 50. Below 50. It is amazing what has happened to these stocks. And in my opinion, I think they're still undervalued relative to the price of gold and silver. Anyway, I have another quote, more of this rhetoric, this one from CNN's Kate Baldwin. Listen to, again, why it is so important that we set aside the budget battle over reducing the deficit, because we have much more important things to do. We cannot risk shutting down the government for this reason. Play cut number 5.
This couldn't come at a worse time. This is the height of the tourist season for the Smithsonian, for Washington. I'm told by a Smithsonian spokeswoman that 3 million people visited the Smithsonian's museums and the National Zoo in the month of April last year. This weekend last year, 500,000 people visited the Smithsonian's museums. And as I said, it's not making people happy with the idea of potential shutdown and a shutdown of some of Washington's biggest draws.
Oh my gosh. We can't risk vacationers not being able to get into the museum, into the Smithsonian. You know what's going to be in the Smithsonian, right? Are the Constitution as a dead relic, our whole standard of living. None of this is important. This pales in comparison. Yes, so will some tourists be unhappy if they can't see the Smithsonian? Yeah, but they're going to be a lot more unhappy to watch their country completely, collapse, to watch their savings get eviscerated, to watch their standard of living implode as we print and spend the country into economic ruin. I think we can risk a few disappointed vacationers to save the country. Right? What's more important, this vacation or the rest of their lives or their children's lives? Let's put this in perspective. People do not understand what's at stake here. They will after the fact, when this collapse happens. But, of course, it'll be just like the last collapse. Oh, nobody could have seen this coming, right out of left field, totally impossible. It must be because capitalism doesn't work. It must be because we didn't have enough government, we didn't have enough regulation. That's why all this thing fell apart. We need to abandon capitalism completely. Karl Marx was right. We need a gut command economy. We need to all hold hands and join together in a new socialist utopia that will be created by Barack Obama and Congress. Anyway, back to the phones. Darren in Murrieta, California. You're on.
Hey, Peter. How you doing? Hey, don't you think gold and silver do well even in a rising interest rate environment? Because then the money that's sitting as excess reserves will start actually hitting the street, because they won't be able to make money buying bonds with it anymore.
The reason I believe that gold is going to do well in a rising interest rate environment is because I think rates will rise too slowly, and so. What's important for gold is not nominal rates, but real rates. So as long as interest rates are below the rate of inflation, gold is going to rise, in my opinion. So, because you've got negative real rates. So even if the Fed raises rates to 5%, but inflation is 10% or 12%, I mean, those are huge real negative rates. And so gold and silver prices will rise even faster. What the Fed needs to do to put the brakes on gold and silver is to get ahead of the curve, to get very high real interest rates, to increase the cost of holding gold and silver, to tell people, hey, if you own gold and silver, you're giving up all this interest. See, right now, owning gold and silver doesn't cost you anything. It makes you money. It protects you. Because if you don't own gold or silver, you're going to lose, because the inflation is higher than any interest you can earn on your money. The government has to change that dynamic. The government has to say, no, we will give you more interest than the rate of inflation. But if they do that, they collapse our whole economy. That is the problem. They cannot stop gold and silver from rising without completely eviscerating this entire phony recovery, which everybody in Congress is dead set on continuing. Nobody wants to admit the recovery is phony, and nobody wants to cut it off. And so I think they will print and print and print until they destroy the currency. And raising interest rates, nominally is going to do nothing to derail the move in gold. Now, if there were a rate hike, could there be a sell-off, a profit taking? Well, absolutely. But change the trend? No.
Yeah, and then I'm glad you kept interrupting Kiyosaki yesterday. That guy's a hypocrite. I mean, he sits there and games the system, and instead of being a true patriot and trying to teach people how criminal the system is, he sits there and tries to make money off it. I mean, which is fine, but he should be out there being a spokesman about how criminal the system is, not how to work it.
I still don't think it's as easy as he say. Yeah, I do know there are a lot of tax breaks associated with real estate, and that's unfortunate. And yes, some people can exploit them, but beyond that, I don't know how, I don't know how to run a business like mine and not pay any taxes. I mean, I just don't. I don't know that it's as simple as that. I mean, I haven't read the rest of the book, but I think that there are certain loopholes that are written for certain companies, but I think that the majority of businesses probably can't take advantage of them. I think the only way to pay less taxes is to work less. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people do that. And as taxes increase, the incentive to work decreases. And yes, people do spend more time figuring out how to avoid taxes than make money. And that is a problem because when they're making money, they're growing the economy. When they're avoiding taxes, they're doing nothing productive.
Right. And I know a gentleman who knows your dad who actually took on the IRS and beat them. He would be a good guest for you guys to have. I could give the number to your guy if you'd like it.
Well, I might know who he is. I mean, I don't know. There's a few people. There are a few people out there that have followed my dad's advice and who have been tried and who have been acquitted. So every once in a while, you get an honest jury. And that happens once in a while. So who knows? Maybe. Anyway, thanks for the call. Next up is local caller here in Connecticut, Dan calling from Newtown. How you doing, Dan?
Peter, how you doing? Peter, how are you?
Good. Still trying to get rid of this cough, but otherwise I'm hanging in there.
Oh, well, hey, question for you. One of the things I was just looking at, obviously the first age of the baby boomer, the first 65-year-old, first baby boomers turned 65 this year. Mm-hmm. And, and they're entering into Social Security and Medicare, two systems that are just broke. I mean, how do we possibly overcome the deficits that we have when, we've already created these problems before these people have taken a dime out of the system?
Well, you can't overcome them. I mean, the problems we have to totally dismantle. The system cannot be sustained. What the politicians want to do is lie about Social Security, lie about inflation, so they can slash Social Security benefits by debasing the dollar and not increasing it, with inflation. And so that's what's going to happen. I mean, if you get your Social Security check and you can only buy half as much as you used to, well, that's like getting half your Social Security. That's what the government is going to do, but I think that's the wrong way to go about it. Anyway, don't go away. If you want to hold on, we'll continue after the break. This is Peter Schiff on SchiffRadio.com, the gold standard in talk radio.
The Peter Schiff Show.
We now return to the Peter Schiff Show.
Call in now, 855-4-SCHIFF.
That's 855-472-4433.
Rebel Radio, the Peter Schiff Show.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Peter Schiff, SchiffRadio.com. And, the CRB index right now is at 367. This is a new 2.5-year high. It's not a record high yet. We still haven't eclipsed the high of mid-2008 before the financial crisis. I think we will take that high out maybe before the end of this year. I believe now that we've taken out this new high, my short-term projection would be for the CRB to get above 400 by the end of May. So that's in less than 2 months. I think that we can see a 9% increase in the CRB, which is commodity prices across the board. Where might oil be if the CRB is at 400? Oh, at least maybe 120, 125. But other commodity prices will be quite a bit higher as well. Anyway, let me go back to the phones. Was my current caller still on hold from before the break?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, go ahead. Was this Dan from Newtown, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Just one more question. I mean, it looks like the food prices have started to come down a little bit versus the metals and oil. You think food prices this summer are still going to increase?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're talking about food prices at the supermarket, or you're talking about just commodities on the Board of Trade?
Yeah, the Board of Trade.
Yeah, I mean, I think the ags are going to break out again and make a big move. But what I think is you're going to start to really see big increases now in food prices in the months and years ahead at the supermarket. because every aspect of food is more expensive, from the food itself to the packaging around the food to the energy required to transport it. I mean, the whole process. The only thing that maybe hasn't gotten more expensive is to the extent that the food is grown locally, the wages of the workers aren't rising, although in many cases the cost of employing them is, as the employers have to have more mandates associated with maintaining those workers. So, I mean, prices are just going to really go up, and Americans are going to start to see it. And the price increases I think we get this summer until the end of the year, while they're going to be huge, they will still pale in comparison to the increases that we get the following year. Because inflation works with a lag. So we're just probably dealing with the inflation that was created last year. Wait till we get to the inflation that we create this year. And, of course, wait till we have to deal with the inflation that we create next year. So Americans are going to be changing their eating habits. I mean, a lot of people are just going to be giving up meat. A lot of people are going to be giving up fish. I mean, our whole diet is going to change because people are not going to be able to afford the food.
Well, I mean, doesn't see, 2 years ago, we saw the same thing happen. We watched food go up, and actually 2 years ago,
I'm not, you're breaking up. I don't know, I lost, the signal is too bad. And Dan, thank you for calling. Let me move forward to Dave from Sedona. Dave, you're on with Peter Schiff.
Yes, Peter, I want to compliment you on how well you kept the separation of church and state when you did your Senate campaign run. You kept the moral and the social issues out of it, the abortion, gambling, prostitution, marijuana, gays. I just see the Republican Party shooting themselves in the foot with the Tea Partiers by pushing forward like a Mitt Romney, a Palin, a Huckabee, Gingrich. They're forgetting everything you're talking about, which is it's all about finances. If we don't survive the financial crash, our country's history.
And the problem with focusing on the social issues is you hand that issue to the left, and that's the issue that they attack you on. If you keep that out of it and focus on just the important things of financial ruin and the economy and taxes and spending and regulation, then you force the Democrats to respond to that. But if you make it about abortion, then all of a sudden they're about women's rights, and if you elect the Republicans, then you're going to have back alley abortions and women dying. I mean, so what you got to separate it. I always said that those are states' issues. That's how I handle it. Look, these are issues that none of the federal government's business. I'm not running for a state office. I'm running for a federal office. So I'm not. This is what, and I'm running because the country is about to collapse, and I want to see if I can prevent it. And the thing is, we can't even prevent. There is a big consequence for what the government has already done. The key is to stop making it worse and take the medicine already so we can start making it better. But there is no way to make it better without having to first deal with some very unpleasant realities.
Right, absolutely. And then right now, when here they're in their budget crisis, they're going to shut down the government. And what are the Republicans hooking to it? Planned Parenthood. What do we want? More unwanted children? It makes, and that's the topic. That's what they keep bringing it up. It infuriates me. I'm an independent, and each time, I love, Ron Paul because he's great. But realistically, he's a bit old. I mean, it's like running a McCain or a Bob Dole.
Yeah, he's old, but
his...
he's an oldie but a goodie, and I'd rather have an old Ron Paul than a young Barack Obama.
I would too, but I'm afraid the U.S. citizens are not ready for him. I think we have to literally crash before, we're accepted.
Well, you may be right about that. Just like an alcoholic, we may have to hit rock bottom before we admit that we have a problem. And, it's a long way to rock bottom, but I think we're headed there.
Yes. And then one question, this is Japan, with their funding of their catastrophe that they're going through, and I'm not seeing any, massive selling of treasury bills to fund it. Are they literally printing the money along with the ECB bailing out Portugal, Ireland, and Greece?
Yeah, they are printing money, but I still have to believe that the Japanese, especially now that they've seen this big fall in the value of their own currency, that they might think, maybe we should sell some of these treasuries, because now, if they sell the treasuries and the yen were to fall, it can still fall quite a bit. Because it is really, really a weakening. If the yen rose, it still wouldn't rise back to where it was, and they might be tempted to use the strength of the dollar against the yen as an opportunity, which is what they should be doing, of selling now treasuries and getting their yen back cheaper, which is what they should do if they were smart. But as I said, it's hard to figure out when politicians are going to stop being stupid because they have such a history of being stupid, and it's very difficult to figure out when they're going to stop doing something that's wrong. And so for now, the Japanese politicians continue to make mistakes that undermine Japan and do more damage than the earthquake.
And that ECB, do they really have money that they're loaning, or is that literally printed?
Yeah, they still are. The ECB is trying to maintain some credibility on inflation by raising rates. But remember, they raised them from 1% to 1.25%. So, I would ask, the officials at the ECB, if 1% interest rates is creating inflation, do you really think 1.25% is going to put out the fire? If rates are too low, and because they're too low, you're seeing all this inflation, you're seeing rising prices, are you really going to change the dynamic by raising rates from 1% to 1.25%? The answer would have to be no. So, they're behind the curve. They are not doing what they need to do. And inflation will get worse in the Eurozone. Now, it's going to get even worse in America than it will in the Eurozone, but it's going to get worse on both continents because both central banks are too complacent. It's just that, we take it to a whole nother level.
Thank you for your clear thinking. Appreciate it.
Thank you for calling. Next caller is Peter in San Jose, California.
Hello, Peter. Good morning. How are you doing?
Okay, how are you?
I'm doing great. First of all, I have a comment and a question. My comment is that I want to thank you very much for your hard work that you do. I feel like every time I listen to your show, I learn something new. It's almost like a college education for me. I went from knowing nothing about money to actually making some pretty good money now that I've been listening to your advice.
I'm glad I could help. Let's hold your question up for after this commercial break. So don't go away. There's more of the Peter Schiff Show. One more segment left to come on SchiffRadio.com.
The Peter Schiff Show. Since the Peter Schiff Show was last on the air, the national debt added another $7.89 million.
Luckily, Peter's intelligence is growing twice as fast.
That's incredible.
Welcome back to your source of sanity in an insane world. It's the Peter Schiff Show.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Peter Schiff. Last segment of SchiffRadio.com. If you haven't gotten enough Peter Schiff today, you can catch me this evening on Fox Business Scoreboard with Eric Bolling. I think it comes on at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. So check it out. Anyway, back to Peter in San Jose. Peter.
Hey, Peter. Thanks a lot for taking my call again. Like I was saying, I want to thank you so much for all your work and everything you do. I've learned so much. I've been listening to you since you had the Wall Street Spun. I got through your books, the support of your Senate race. I'm a Schiff premium member, and I tell you, my only regret is not having learned about you sooner, because I would have avoided that mess in 2007. But since I've been listening to you, I've been making some really good progress, and I want to thank you for your honesty and everything that you do.
Thank you. Did you have a question?
I sure do. I'm 30 years old, and I'm thinking about buying a life insurance policy that adjusts for inflation at 5% a year. And since you were just talking about inflation going higher in the future, I was thinking if you had a percentage that you wanted to tie to that,
personally, I would not want life insurance policies denominated in dollars. because let's assume you were to pass away. If the dollar has very little value, then the policy is going to give very little relief to your wife or children or whoever the beneficiaries are. So personally, if I were going to buy life insurance, I think, people need life insurance. Certainly if you're working, you have kids, and people depend on you. And you don't even need a whole life policy. I think term works best for most people. But I would try to find a Swiss insurance company. It's illegal for them to advertise here, but you can try to find one out and buy a policy that pays you in Swiss francs. Now, your premiums would probably have to be in francs, so your premiums would probably be going up as the dollar went down, but at least you'd have an insurance premium, an insurance policy that would pay off in something of real value, because I think a lot of people are going to inherit money that buys very little, and so it's like having no insurance at all.
Absolutely, I agree with you. That's my thought right now, because I think the premium is at $450, $450,000, increasing 5% a year. But I'm thinking from that until the time that you get that, is that going to be enough? For my wife and my two kids. But basically, you're saying it might not be.
Yeah,
it will not be.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and a lot of it too depends on when you happen to pass away. I mean, if you happen to die, right away, and then they got a big lump sum, and they had enough time to take that money and convert it into gold or Swiss francs, then. But if by the time you've died, the dollar has already crashed. You might find out. Let's say you're paying premiums for many, many years, and then all of a sudden the dollar collapses, and now you realize that the benefit that you would get is so small that you've basically wasted your money all those years, because the death benefit is now practically worthless because of the decline of the dollar.
That's exactly what I'm thinking. So it pretty much defeats the whole purpose.
Although that's only if you buy whole life, I suppose. Yeah, because if you buy term, it wasn't worthless because you didn't die, and so they didn't need the money. But yeah, if you're building up any kind of cash value, then that would be the case. But yeah, certainly. If you see the dollar declining in a term policy, you have the ability to go and renew it for a larger dollar amount, right? So you could just, you can up the coverage to take into account the weakening dollar.
Well, again, thank you very much. I appreciate your advice.
All right, thanks for the call. Next caller is Carl in Houston, Texas. Carl, are you there?
Hi, Peter.
Yes.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay. Yeah, Peter, I had a question trying to figure out the answer to this. There's this big, basic government shutdown that's proposed over about a $30 to $60 billion, peanuts, essentially what amounts to peanuts. My question is this: is that the much bigger thing comes next month when the debt ceiling has to be raised. But here's the question, and I'd like to hear your answer. So maybe I'll just ask this and then hang up. Is that raising it essentially is just a very simple measure if they can agree on it, right? They have to raise it by somewhere between $1.5 to $2 trillion to give them adequate room.
Yeah, that'll probably buy us to the end of the year. They'll have to do.
Right.
If they only raise it $1 trillion, they're going to have to do it again before the next election. See, probably what they want to do is raise it by a large enough amount that it'll coast them through the next election in 2012. So they might have to goose it up by 3 or 4 trillion to do that.
That's true. I agree with you. But here's the question: is that there's this automatic assumption that once it's raised, that the market will allow those bonds to be floated. And
yeah, we're talking about a self-imposed debt ceiling, right? We can't do anything about a debt ceiling imposed from the creditors. See, we can only borrow as long as the world is willing to lend. So it doesn't matter what the debt ceiling is. If no one wants the bonds, we can't sell them. The problem is, if nobody wants the bonds, the Fed steps up and buys them. That's the problem, because then you get the inflation. You follow me? Is my caller there?
He must have dropped off.
And then the thing is, if the Federal Reserve, the only reason the Federal Reserve can print money to buy the bonds is because we raise the debt ceiling. See, that's another problem. If we don't raise the debt ceiling, then Congress can't give the Fed the opportunity to buy the bonds because they can't issue them. So what we will end up doing by increasing the debt ceiling is guaranteeing massive inflation. Because, yes, at some point, the world isn't going to want to lend us any money we're going to have to cut back. Anyway, I thought I would mention before the end of the show kind of a funny anecdote. I mentioned this guy. I called him Mr. X, and I said he totally copied my website word for word, plagiarized the whole thing, and he was basically trying to offer similar investment advice to me: get out of the dollar, buy foreign assets, buy precious metals. And he had been a guest on Glenn Beck, and Glenn Beck was promoting his book and was no longer promoting mine. I mentioned that the guy has worked for 17 companies I've never heard of in the past 25 years. He's a one-man shop masquerading as something bigger than he is. But I guess he listens to my show because he changed every sentence on his website now. It's still the exact same font, the exact same look, but he's made, instead of global market wrap-up, he changed it to world market wrap-up. Instead of call for our free investment picks, call for our free portfolio reviews. He's gone from free special reports to free market alerts. He's gone from where we stand to our guiding principles. He's gone every single word. Instead of saying, don't miss Mr. X on Fox, it's see Mr. X on Fox. So across the board, right up. I think he's even changed the Mr. X was right to Mr. X got it right. Very subtle change, but he's now gone to great pains to make sure that he has reworded every single tab, every single line on his website, so it is no longer quite so obvious that he lifted the entire thing from the Euro-Pacific Capital website. But anyway, I'm glad that he changed it a little bit, but it's still the same. It was still a copy. And at least the one thing he could have at least done on his recommended reading list, which he now changed, instead of saying recommended reading, he changed it to favorite books. He could have at least put my book on his reading list. After all, whatever he knows, he undoubtedly potentially learned from that book, although I'm not even sure how much the guy actually knows. But anyway, that's probably it for today's show. Hey, don't forget to tell your friends about the Peter Schiff Show. We got to really get the viewers. Have people, put it on their Facebook pages. Let's get some more friends on the Peter Schiff Facebook page, on the Peter Schiff YouTube channel. Spread them around. Get the word out there. Call up some of these local radio shows so we maybe have a better shot of getting the show on the air. And if you're not already a premium member to Schiff Radio, sign up. It's a good deal. There's a lot of content on there. More content to come. You've got video content. So I think it's worthwhile. And, I think the more premium members that we have, the more viable the show looks when we're talking to other stations, under syndicators, when we can tell them how many people that we have that are paying subscribers to the show. That shows a real dedicated audience. It shows that that our product, the Peter Schiff Show, has legs, has real support, and it may make it more attractive to pick it up. Because it is important, as our economy collapses, for there to be a voice of reason on the airwaves explaining in clear terms why it is happening, and not allow the government to hijack the message and blame our problems on capitalism when it's government that is the source of these problems, and it is bigger government that is making them worse. Anyway, that's it for this week, everybody. Have a great weekend. Be back on Monday for another full episode of The Peter Schiff Show on SchiffRadio.com. Actually, yes, I will be here Monday. Anyway, stay tuned. Have a great weekend, everybody. This is Peter Schiff on SchiffRadio.com.
The Peter Schiff Show.